We've invited these beautiful ladies to come and tell us a little bit about what it was like here in Santa Clara, raising their families and growing up. And to start off, we'll give them the mic and let them tell a little bit about, tell us your name and a little bit about yourself. And today is Monday, August 16th, 2021.
My name is Gwendolyn Fry, and I was raised in St. George to two of the best parents anyone could have, and I bet these ladies will all say the same. I was born in February. It was a very, very cold winter, and so Mother wrapped me up in a whole bunch of cotton blankets, and Daddy called me his cotton dolly. So that's what I am, is a cotton dolly. Anyway, I have 4 sisters. 2 of them don't live on this earth anymore. I was raised on 700 East in the Boulevard, and that was the last part of St. George there was. There was one block in the St. George standard, and now look at it. We have 4 children. We have Daniel and David and Randy and Sally. And when I had Sally, you remember Beulah Graff, she called everybody in town and said, "Sally's born, Sally's born." And they're going, "Who's Sally?" So she was as excited as I was. What else do you want to know? That's good? Okay. Huh?
Who'd you marry?
Oh, I thought I said Vic. Okay, I married Victor Fry. Okay, now you got me on a roll here. I got to tell this one. It was Thanksgiving, and my cousin brought a boy to the Thanksgiving dinner. Well, you don't usually bring a boy unless you're kind of interested, and his name was Victor Fry. And so when we sat down to eat, Vic was here, and Janine was there, and I was here. He kept trying to pass me a vegetable or something, and I thought, this is strange, but I just let it go. So after dinner, then he and Janine were going to go for a ride. And he said, "Do you want to go with us?" There was the 3 oldest cousins. And we said, "Oh, sure." So then we went for a ride, and then they came back to my grandmother's house, and he says, "Do you want to go to the movie with us?" And I said, "No, thank you." And the rest is history.
My name is Edna Gubler Hunt. I'm a Dixie girl. I spent my first 18 years living in Santa Clara, and there wasn't a better place in the world, on earth. All of my pioneers came from Switzerland, my grandmas and grandpas, and then my great-great-grandpas on all sides and grandmas, and so I'm full Swiss. And I've always been so proud of that. And I love when people call me a Santa Clara Dutchman. But I guess it's Dutchman now. That means it's Swiss and German. So that's what I am, as a Santa Clara Dutchman. But I love living here. I lived with my dad, Edmund Gubler, and Eliza Hafen Gubler, up across the street from Grant Hafen. I don't know who lives there now, but I grew up there. I had 1 brother, and there was 8 girls. I was number 3 from the end. And we had a wonderful family. We just did so many things together, mostly just at home, and then when I met a few girlfriends, when I got a little older, I had a lot of fun with them. But I always loved my family. My grandma lived with us, my grandma Hafen. Annie Mary Elizabeth was her name, Hafen, Huber Hafen. And she lived with us the last 10 years or maybe even more after Grandpa Hafen died, John George Hafen. She was his 3rd wife. And she'd come over from Switzerland by herself after the missionaries converted her. And they talked her into coming, and her mother didn't want her to live at home anymore after she joined the church. And so the 3 or 4 missionaries were coming back to America. They'd been there, and Grandpa Hafen was one of them. But they said, "If you'll come with us, we'll find you a place to live, and and you can find a husband there and live there and be among the Latter-day Saints, the Mormons. And so she came by herself, and so brave and such a wonderful lady. I feel proud to be her her granddaughter. Anyway, after I was almost 18, well, I met my husband when I was 17, when I was the Dixie Rodeo Queen, and for St. George Rodeo Lions Club. But the reason I got to be queen was Horace and Ethel MacArthur stopped me one day and said, "Would you run for queen for Dixie Roundup?" And I said, "Oh, I love to ride horses, but I don't have a real fancy horse. I can ride a lot of different horses, but I don't have any clothes I could wear." And Ethel said, "Well, you can wear my rodeo outfit. I have a real pretty one, and I have boots. You can wear them, and I think they'll just fit you." I said, "Okay." So I used them and went over and tried out for rodeo queen with 16 other girls. And there was one from Enterprise, Edith Hunt, and her husband was Bill Hunt, and Bill was a brother to Ivan Hunt that later became my husband. That's a story. Anyway, I was so happy to represent the Santa Clara Mercantile, the only store in town, and Santa Clara. Santa Clara had only had one or two queens in all the years. And my oldest sister, Jewel Fry, she had been a queen, one of the queens. And I thought that'd be an honor, but I could never win that. And so anyway, it turned out that I got to be the rodeo queen and represented Santa Clara. Everywhere I went, they asked me, "Where are you from?" And I said, "I'm from Santa Clara, Utah." I did marry Ivan the year after I was a queen, the second year. And we had 5 children, and they're all turned out wonderful. 3 boys and 2 daughters. And I had to live in Enterprise for 52 years. I didn't have to, but I did. I wanted to, I guess. I told Ivan I'd marry him if we can live in Santa Clara. And he said, "Well, we can't do that because I have a farm and a ranch in Enterprise, and I wanted a cowgirl to marry to help me." I said, "Okay," because I like to do that. So we lived there for 52 years when he finally passed. And I came back to Dixie. I tried Santa Clara. There wasn't a house available I could buy or rent. And in St. George, not many. But I did find a townhome upon the ridge, townhome upon the Black Hill on the north end. And so I was close to Santa Clara, so I could come over for all the activities and see my families here.
My name is Charmaine Ray Fry, and I was actually born in Santa Clara in what you all now know as Uncle and Andy's. That was my Uncle and Andy, and that was where I was born, so I always kind of claimed that house pretty good. No one thought I was from Santa Clara because I didn't have the right name. You know, it wasn't Stookie or Fry or Graff or Goober. So I finally had to marry one to make it legal, which I did. And I was gone for 10 years as I taught school in Nevada and lived in the state of Washington and worked up there in the roundabout. And then Clayton married me and brought me back to Santa Clara after 10 years, and I was really happy. I agree that it's the best place in the world to rear kids. And every once in a while I'll say, I feel so sorry for my grandkids that they didn't get a chance to grow up here. They'll never know what it is to roam the hills, which we did, and the creek bed, and we were free. We'd be gone for hours, and their parents never worried about us. But they didn't have to. The town took care of us. If we weren't doing something right, I ran home so I could tell Mom before the neighbors did. And I'm serious. I really did.
My name is Ramona Chamberlain Hafen. I was I was born in Kanab, actually, but I grew up in Orderville. I was the sixth of 6 children, the baby girl. They let me know that. I went to high school and graduated from Valley High School. Then I came down to Dixie. My older sister was going to school down here, and she loved it. And I came down to visit her. We were out of school a couple of weeks earlier than college was. And she had a date. Orlo Hafen had a date with her. I think they were going to Vail to swim with a school group. And he came to pick her up. And that was my first introduction to my husband. And I wasn't very impressed. I was 5 years younger, and he wasn't very impressed. He said I was just a little girl sitting on the bed. So then the war came, and he was a pilot in the World War II. And I graduated from high school, and then I came to Dixie. And the boys were coming home from the war, and that was an exciting time. I think in one of my classes there were only 2 girls, and all the rest were boys. But anyway, I went out with Arlo a time or two, and I don't think he was very impressed. And so I just went up with the guys. And then a little later on, we dated a little more. Then he graduated from Dixie, and I still had another year. So I decided I'd be a school teacher, so I went up to Cedar because you could get your teaching degree up there. And he was up to, he went to the University of Utah, he learned the BYU, and then he decided he was going to be a teacher. So he could get his last semester at Cedar, so he came there and I was there, and so we got together there. And Vic kind of encouraged him. Arlo was getting a little older, and Arlo said, well, it was the best time to get married, and I was available. So I always thought that's kind of funny. So we went back for him to do school and teaching them. We came down here and we lived in the school fees basement for 2 or 3 months. Then his mother died, so we moved in with her for a little while. Then he built us a home, and it was the first one down from the church on across from where the post office is now. There's nothing there but barns and corrals and fields. So we were the only house down there. Some people thought we were crazy to build way down there off of the highway. I think Helen and Melvin were kind of off the highway too. So we lived there the rest of our married life. We died 10 years ago. We raised 7 kids there. And it's been a wonderful place. I've loved everybody in there except me. Sometimes we hear that it's the Santa Clara people didn't accept people being. I never thought that. It's been a wonderful life for them. A wonderful place. I forgot to mention, my ancestors were from England and Sweden. They were United Order. If you heard that, Orville. So I'm proud of my heritage there, and I'm proud of my Arlo Swiss heritage here, and that our kids have both. I love living here, and appreciate all the people that done for my family.
Now, I was born in Hurricane, Utah. I was a Woodbury, and I was the number 6 in a family of 7. One sister who was old, she was 15 when I was born. And I had 4 brothers in between, and then 1 brother younger. I went to school in Hurricane until I graduated in 1944, and I learned to play tennis, and softball was on the Hurricane High School softball team. I went with Clara after meeting him at a skating party. The Dixie Seminary invited the Hurricane Seminary over to St. George to a seminary party, and I met him, and as we were skating around, I ran into him, and he told me who he was, and I said, "Oh, I heard you was one of those Dutchmen." "We're not Dutch, we're Swiss." He was a year older, and then I went with him all during my junior year. Then when he graduated that summer, he was drafted in the Army because World War II was going on. He was drafted in July. In October, he was in Salt Lake ready to be sent to his where he was going to have his basic. And his mother and dad come over and got me and my mother, and we drove to Salt Lake, found a LDS bishop, and asked if he would marry us. And he married us, and he went on to his basic training, and I came home to finish school. When I started my senior year, that was in October. That's when we got married. And we went, school was important to me, to learn to make friends and to learn to learn. And now the school isn't teaching what we used to learn. And when he come home from the war, we went down to get him. Ken Entz was drafted at the same time, but he wasn't sent overseas, but Clara was. And he was sent to the Philippines. But before he went, he had a week's furlough. So in March, I was still going to school. I was a senior in high school. So in March, he came home for a week's vacation. I left school, and I got pregnant. So I finished high school pregnant, and Clara Lynn was born in 1944. And he didn't see her until she was a year old. And after he got home, we lived with his mother and dad, and then there was a vacant lot next door, and so we started building a house by the time we had Gay. And I couldn't have any more kids, so we adopted two. And when my aunt asked me, she says, "Would you like to have a little boy?" And I said, "Well, I sure would." I asked Clara, I said, what do you think, taking this little boy as a foster child? And he said, "Well, let's try it." He brought him over. She brought him over, and he walked in the door, and Gay says, "Oh, I don't know. I go to kindergarten with you." So she and Marlo went all the way through school the same age. She was born in June, and Marlo was born in July. And they've been friends ever since. And we just loved him. Of course, he kind of went a little bit wayward, but then by the time he got through with Vietnam, come back home, married a little enterprise girl and wanted to farm, so we turned the farm over to him. And that's when Clara and I learned how to golf. And we loved it. But anyhow, raising the kids here in Santa Clara, now I've been here for pretty close to 76 years. I think. I tried to figure it out. But raising the kids here, if we corrected any of them, their parents would thank us. But you wouldn't dare do that now. But we loved it. Well, I knew everybody, and everybody knew everybody. Didn't we know everybody? But now I don't know a soul. Too many people have moved in, but I love them. But it was a good place to raise kids. And then we adopted Melanie when those kids was 13 and Clara Lynn was 15. And all five of us spoiled her. We loved them. Anyhow, we bought a farm out on the Enterprise Desert, and we'd pack up the kids in the spring and go out there and farm all summer long, and then pack them up and bring them back to go to school. And one of the things that it asked, what was something that that was, what was the wording? What was remember, see, What were some of the hardest times that you remember? And it was out on the Enterprise Desert when our potato crop got frozen. And we had to dig them up and throw them away. And either that or when the rain rained on the hay before we got it baled. But I learned how to bale hay, and I learned how to drive a truck, and I think that that's why my health has been as good as I have, is because I've been always active. And Clara and I did everything together, didn't we? Yeah. So anyhow, and I was the rodeo queen over to Hurricane Peach Days. So, so Gay was rodeo queen over here.
My name is Mary Alice Formaster Gates, and I was born in St. George and raised there by two good parents also. And in 1958, I married Don Gates, and we moved to Santa Clara. And we've lived here ever since, and it's the best move of my life. It's a good place to live. I love it here. We have 6 children. Our oldest daughter, we have a daughter and 5 sons. Our oldest daughter is Mary Dawn Gubler. She lives in Santa Clara. And then John lives in Islands. Brett lives in Santa Clara, California. Travis and Chad and Brandon. Travis and Chad live in Santa Clara. Brandon is going to build a home in Santa Clara someday. He has a lot here to build. So I'm happy that they like well enough to come back here to live also.
My name is Jill Jensen MacArthur, and I grew up in Las Vegas, not here. And Doug and I are both only children, and I was always going to marry somebody with at least 10 brothers and sisters, but that didn't happen. But the way we got acquainted is we had the same aunt, and it's Roy Hafen's mother, was my mom's sister, and Doug's mother was Uncle Dan's brother and sister. So we came up here for all the holidays because we were alone in Vegas. So that's kind of how we got acquainted through many years. And so finally, our senior year, he asked me out. And that's how he came down to the dances, and that was a fun year. And I went to Rancho High School in Vegas. And we have 4 children, Natalie, Wendy, Holly, and Tim. And I've loved living here. It's been a fun thing for us. And I married Doug MacArthur. I don't think I said that.
My name is Sherry Miles Gubler, and I was born and raised in St. George and had a happy childhood. Oh my goodness, our neighbors all played together. We played Tarzan, and I was always Jane. And we'd swing back and forth in a great big barn with a great big rope. We sure had a fun childhood. And as we grew older, we enjoyed Woodward High and Woodward Junior High and high school right there in St. George. I lived a block south of the college building, the old Rock College building. But when I was younger and in our teenage years, I sang with a boy named John Garner, and we just sang everywhere. We had a lot of fun singing. And then later I sang with Dan Watson, and he had been the secretary to 5 different Dixie College presidents. And he was a busy guy, 10 years older than me. But I come from a family of 4 children, and they're all gone but me. And I have my 7 children, whom I love very much. the way Dale and I met, he and his friend Brooks Hafen lived here in Santa Clara. They were Santa Clara boys, and they decided they were going to get dates. And so Brooks asked my dear friend, my best friend, Pat Fry, Thompson now, and she's deceased, but he asked her out for a date, and he came to Dale and he said, "When are you going to ask Sherry?" And he was too nervous to ask, but he was on his way to the stock show in Salt Lake, and he was showing a couple of pigs. And I worked at the Dixie Theater out in the box, and Pat worked at the Gaiety down in the box, and he stopped his dad's big truck there at the Tabernacle and walked up and asked me for a date. So our first date with Pat and Brooks were to go swimming at Vail after work, after we got through. And so we just had so much fun dating. All these Clary boys, boy, it was fun. And one night we decided we'd pick watermelons from someone's garden. And so Dale went down, Dale and Brooks, and got this watermelon. Well, it was from his dad's own patch. And so it was the kind of fun that we always had. For 2 or 3 years, we dated in a bunch, not solo, but we did have a lot of fun. We have 7 children whom I love very much, and they all live within a half mile of us in our own home here in Santa Clara. So we're a Clary family, and we have enjoyed our life so much. Our son Bill, the oldest, was born in Fort Ord. That's where we were when Dale was in the Korean War, and he had a permanent party there. And so we have Cammie and Clayton Levitt. Well, Bill is married to Julie, and Cammie and Clayton. And then we have Shannon Sue Gubler, and we have Lonnie and Nancy, Tom and Lisa, Heather and Wade, and Megan and Bart. And they're all of our precious children that we do love. And, we just moved about 3 or 4 times here in Santa Clara before we were able to build our home and raise our family here in Santa Clara. Well, life was, like I just got through saying, was wonderful here in Santa Clara. And we knew everyone. We don't, like you said a minute ago, we don't know very many people anymore. So many have moved in. But we did enjoy our life here after Dale and I moved in back to Santa Clara after he'd been in the Army. We came back here to Santa Clara, and there was a group of sweet women, these women right here in front of you, and one of them called and invited me to come with them to have just kind of a little social get-together, and we could do whatever we wanted to do. We could write in scrapbooks, we could mend stockings, we could do all of these things, couldn't we? And just visit. And I remember at Mary Lynn's home one night, I would darn socks, and I brought the light globe and darned these socks. We don't do that anymore, do we? But that was fun, and some wrote in their scrapbooks. And I remember that night we had a nice dish of spaghetti, and that sauce was so good, and Ione had made that sauce, unless she got the recipe from Mary Lynn. But it was really good, and I still make this spaghetti sauce that I really like. But our life here in Santa Clara was just wonderful. And we finally built our home after we'd lived in 2 or 3 different homes here in Santa Clara and raised our children here. We had a little Indian girl that came and lived with us for 4 years on the Indian program from President Kimball. And some of the things I remember here was the fun May Day celebrations. And all of the girls had to have a new May Day dress. Isn't that right? And so I would make these dresses for these little girls that were in our family. And that was a fun occasion. And we had wonderful Christmas parties here in Santa Clara. And they were, the little children in school would perform. I remember the Santa Claus in the little program was Jim Enns, our dear bishop and president and mission president, and he made the cutest little Santa Claus. And all of a sudden, when he started to grow up, he got so thin and tall. He was just handsome. But we had rodeos here in Santa Clara, and Dale had a big part in the rodeos, gathering cattle, and all of you know about these rodeos here in Santa Clara.
When we were married, we were the youngest in town for 10 years. And that's where I grew to love the older people of this town. And there's still some of them right here. And they've been wonderful to me. I was in Relief Society and I was the youngest, but they made me feel like I was part of them, and I absolutely loved it. I've loved living here. We've been in that same house for 60 years, and we're catty corner right across the street from here, so it's been a fun ride for me. Our kids, I feel sorry for the kids today too, because they would go in our backyard and make Indian pottery, because it was clay, and dry it, and they had the most fun doing that. It was just a real fun entertainment for them. And I, like Sherry, my very favorite thing was May Day. In fact, our granddaughter is in charge of some things at the school this year, and I said, oh, that'd be so fun to bring May Day back. She says, Grandma, they wouldn't even know what May Day was. And that's true, but like Sherry said, they got new shorts and that for the afternoon and all the games, and then for the May Day, they always had a new dress. And that was so fun because we had the 3 girls and Tim, and it was a fun time for me anyway. That was one of my favorite times.
About church, and Shan has grown up. Randy Fry and Nick Fry were 3 little friends. And he was telling me, and I didn't know it had even happened, but they skipped church one day. It's when we had an afternoon church and the morning Sunday school. And they all 3 went down to the boys' pond. And they were down there having a good time. And then all of a sudden, there was this big noise there while they were there. And they thought that the Indians had come to get them. And their stay wasn't very long, but we found out later it was Pam Graff.
This has brought back lots of memories to me. Like Sherry said, she was singing. Some of our funnest times were Gwendolyn and Sherry and I singing the trio. And sometimes we'd have our daughters sing with us. and we did programs some places and played for weddings, and that was been a real joy to my life. And what I had Arlo taught school for many years here, and so when they need somebody to play the piano, I'd go up and play, and I'd take my little kids and set them on the bench by me, and they always loved to go too.
When I was in junior high school, I was taking piano lessons, and I was too daggone lazy to practice. My mother says, if I have to make you practice, I'm not going to do it. I said, okay, I'll quit. And that was the biggest mistake I made in my life.
Well, I'll have to add to that. My mother had to pay me 5 cents half an hour to get me to practice.
Maybe if Mom had paid me, I'd have stayed.
Oh, money was pretty important. I've been involved in music a lot because they use what is available. So, what?
You didn't ever pay us?
No, I didn't.
That's why you don't play.
But one of my things that I feel the best about in my raising kids is that I taught all 7 of them to play the piano. And some of them didn't keep it up very long, but they all got so they could at least play hymns.
And the grandchildren.
Oh, and quite a few of the grandchildren, too. Some of them weren't very glad to see me coming to help them, but they were good about it. But anyway. Yeah. But that's been a great blessing to me, and I'd lots rather do that than get up to take charge and give talks and like this. But one thing that I've been really happy about doing it here in Santa Clara are the pageants that we had, the Swiss Days pageants.
Oh, yeah.
And I've got a program for 3 of them that we did in different times, different years. The first one and the best was 1961. And it took in most of the people in Santa Clara, just practically all the families. And I've got the program of it here. And then the next one was 1960-something.
They always were very nice.
Well, it's related somewhere. But anyway, we've done 3 different times in intervals. And then they've changed them some, shortened it a little bit. But Dale and Sherry were the stars in one of the scenes in it. And, I could mention a whole bunch more, but I won't. But
Dale was Sammy River.
yeah, you were Sammy River. And then in the last one, they presented my husband Arlo, who was a lot older, and he was supposed to say he was Sammy River. And he got up there and said, they were kind of reliving the missionaries coming to those who became saints in Switzerland. And so Arlo was portraying the older gentleman. And they came to him, my name is, everybody started to laugh. Somebody coached him, he was Sammy River. But these really stood out in my mind. They were written by 2 ladies with roots in Santa Clara, a Levitt and I can't remember, but I've got it now. But but anyway, those have been important to me, and I've been in the school. I play for most of their activities in school, and for church too. And as I mentioned, it's been so fun to sing in the group.
What life was really like in Santa Clara at the time, we were a very close-knit community. We manufactured practically all our own fun. Holidays were a big event. We met down to what we called the square, and that's where the chapel is now. The square and the schoolhouse was there. So all our activities were together, and they used both buildings simultaneously. When they built the new chapel, they actually held church all the while in the schoolhouse. That's where we held our classes for Sunday school. When the school wanted some small programs, they'd use the church. So they were very much together and worked together. Everybody participated in everything. When it was holidays, whether it was the 4th of July or Christmas or Thanksgiving, you'd have your meals, whatever you did. And everybody'd meet on the square for what we called sports. And there were races and ball games and really, shall I say, friendly competition, which was also between the north side of the street and the south side of the street, the baseball games and everything like that. And it was really fun to see who would win, and they were pretty evenly distributed, the people who were more athletic. So they were pretty good, hard-fought games. We did everything. They had a bunch of swings between the schoolhouse and the church house, and they had what we call the giant strides that we nearly killed ourselves on. We had the slides, and in those days, Wonder Bread wrapped their bread in wax paper, so we'd put it at the top of the slippery slide, sit on it, slide down till those slides were so slick, you just went 100 miles an hour as you went down to it. And always would say, well, I'll meet you down to the square. We just did everything there, and it was always done in a community. We had every May we'd have what we called cleanup day, and when we got through, we'd have a huge town picnic, and everybody would bring their own lunches, which were quite elaborate, and then the town would furnish ice cream, homemade ice cream for it. And
root beer floats too. Used to have root beer floats too.
oh yeah, and there was a great deal of togetherness in it. Like I said, everybody looked out for everybody's children. You didn't have to worry about it. Ball games, I remember always, they had at least 2 baseball games. One was the old married men, as they called them, against the single girls, and that was a fun one. And then they'd have, I remember up in what we called the hall, which was the recreation room up at the top of the school, and the married women would play the single women in competition. And your mother was one of the best players of all. Yes. She really was very athletic. And we made our own fun. We really did. They would have bake sales with pies, and you didn't like for food when you lived in Santa Clara, let me tell you. In our neighborhood, they had a lot of sadness too. In our neighborhood, which had 1, 2, 3, 4 houses in the immediate neighborhood, because we didn't live right in the heart of town. We lived kind of what was then almost the northern outskirts of town, and 3 of the 4 neighbors lost babies in the irrigation ditch. So there was a lot of sadness that went along with a lot of the good fun too. But there was a lot of compassion, and everybody rallied around everybody else when anything happened. News traveled like wildfire, and the women were there. Because we were a little bit removed from town, we didn't have some of the competitive spirit that the Dutchmans had. In the center of town, it was a race to see which women got their wash hung out on the line before anybody else. And it was a really serious competition.
Yes, it was.
Do you remember that?
Yes.
And who did the prettiest bottled fruit? And when we had a bake sale or something, who had the best pies? And during World War II, when everything was rationed, sugar. All the women would put sugar on the top of the pie, and when they'd have a raffle, the auctioneer would keep pouring more sugar on the pie so it would sell on top until you could hardly see the pie sometimes. So many community days. Everything was done together. it was really fun to grow up in Santa Clara. And like I said, I felt sorry for kids that didn't get to grow up here.
I remember so many things in school. The first 3 years was in one classroom. We had 2 classrooms, and every one of the teachers were just wonderful. And then the 4th, 5th, and 6th was in the other classroom. And Mr. Fry, Claude Fry, was our teacher. And everybody loved him. He was such a good teacher. I think we mainly learned the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. But we learned good, and he taught us everything. In fact, when we went to St. George's School at 7th grade, I was in with all my class members, and we knew most everything they were just starting to learn. And I thought, wow, we did have a good teacher in Santa Clara. But a few of the things we did at our school, we would run races at recess, and then we learned to high jump and softball, and we'd go on Easter picnics. Mr. Fry would take us on a picnic every Easter and lots of other times. One time we went up the hill where you go to the Santa Clara Park, only we went up the wash quite a ways, and there's water up there. And so we had our picnic there and waded in the water, and we just had more fun. Another time we did a lot of dancing up in the top of the schoolhouse in the big hall, and just practiced dancing, and Mr. Fry let us have a dance, and then sometimes we'd have our picnic up the hills on the west of town, up where they had bushes, and we'd look for squabish gum. Have all of you tried squabish gum? Well, that was our main thing that we went picnicking for, was that squabish gum. And then we braided the maypole up in the hill, top of the school building. We had our gold and green balls up in the gym also. But we did play a lot of softball. And then as we got a little older, probably 16, 17, Santa Clara started playing softball, and they got a sponsor, Rocky Mountain, wanted to sponsor our ball team because St. George was getting a lot of teams. They wanted us to play against them and show what we could do. Well, we did. We played, the big businesses over there sponsored teams, and we played several teams. And I think we won almost every game. We were just so proud that we'd done a lot of practicing growing up. Rocky Mountain was the one of them that sponsored us when we had our team, and when he was our coach, they were sponsored us, and I think Ron MacArthur, that married Lorna Graff, was our coach, and boy, he kept us playing and knew just what we needed to do. One other thing in school, Mr. Fry, at the end of the week, he had to get the rooms swept nice. So he asked us girls if we'd like to sweep the rooms every Friday, the 2 classrooms. And we said, yes. And he said, well, I'll pay you each a quarter. Oh, wow, that was a lot of money. We were so thrilled to make some money. We never ever had a job to make money. And so we would sweep those rooms and kind of dust them and clean them. And then one other thing that he was good at, he always come out after recess and rang the bell to end recess. And he started letting us girls, I guess mostly girls, do that. We'd have to take turns. Each recess, one of the different ones, you'd go ring that bell, and then they all had to come in. And one other day I remembered was quite exciting for most of the day. We went, I think it was morning, we was in school, and then we went home for lunch and come back. I went into school. But before he rang the bell to come in, we got together, I think most of his class members, and we said, we've never had a slough day. I think we need to slough today. And we said, okay. So we went down towards the river, the Santa Clara River, and waded in the river instead of going back into class. And I think we was gone an hour or more, and thought, maybe we better get back. And so we went back, and Mr. Fry met us there at the door. And he said, "Where have you been?" We said, "Oh, we had a slough day today." And he said, "Okay, that's your first and your last slough day. If you ever do that again, I'll call your parent. Well, you can go home to your parents. You can't come to school until your parents bring you." And I'd never forgot that. It was such a fun day. I don't know if they ever did that again after I was gone. Let's see. I had a few other things written down that I wanted to mention. Anyway, I've always been really proud to call Santa Clara my home. Santa Clara used to have rodeos all the time, every year. I think it's the 24th of July. Does anyone know?
It was Thanksgiving.
Oh, it's Thanksgiving. Okay. And we had it up where
The rodeo.
the rodeo grounds. We had rodeo grounds up where the city park is. So we had wonderful rodeos, and they let all the boys ride calves out. And then they had cowboys that would come and rope the cows and the calves. But one day, me and one of my friends, I don't know which one it was, we wanted to ride a calf out of the chute like the boys did. We thought we can ride that too. And so my friend went first. I don't know whether it was Dolores or Lucy or Charmaine or... Anyway, here come the calf out, and it was just bouncing. And she went right off. And then it was my turn. I didn't know that I wanted to do that, but okay, I got ready. They opened the gate, and the calf I was on just took off a running, and just fast, clear out to the middle of the arena, and then they give a little jump, and off I went. That was the only time I ever rode a calf. But I wanted to mention Santa Clara Swiss Days. I just loved Swiss Days. Even after I'd moved to St. George, I always come to your Swiss Days. And one year they was making a lot of demonstrating different things that the Swiss people made, their egg bread and Swiss egg bread and the Swiss noodles, and they asked me if I'd make the Swiss noodles. And I said, yes, I would love to. I make them all the time, and I still do. How many of you still make noodles? Raise your hand. Oh, come on. Anyway, I made the dough at home and then I showed them, I said, you have to roll it out real thin in a big circle. And then you cut it down the middle and fold it over. And you could cut it again, but you keep it together and roll it into a long, looked like a tube. Anyway, and then you'd have to cut it. And so you'd put your fingers right down there and take the knife, go right along by your fingers as close as you could get without cutting your fingers, and cut the noodles. And all the whole thing, you cut, and then you had a big pile of noodles, just really thin, like Swiss noodles are. Some of you need to learn how to make noodles again. Did you? One other thing, after I moved away from Santa Clara, I always considered Santa Clara my hometown. But after you start having Swiss days and getting your Swiss cows, well, I had to have a Swiss cow, the first thing. But I lived over there in the townhome, and I thought, it'll be beautiful here in front of my garage. And so I come over and bought a cow and took it over, and my daughter helped me paint it. We painted it brown, like our Hereford cows that we'd been around our whole life. And then we put my dad's brand on the back, VA, and made some horns. And then we put it was a beautiful cow. My daughter made eyelashes on its eyes and real nice feet. And then I put a big wreath around it with a lot of flowers on it. And it sits, every Swiss days, it sits in front of my garage. And 3 or 4 days, 4 Swiss days, I put it out. And if I haven't got it out, my neighbors start saying, have you still got a cow? When you can put it out? And so I would get it out and set it there. And I had more people and little kids stop and look at that cow. And they're almost life-size, aren't they? They're big. Anyway, I still love my Swiss cow, and I'm still going to keep putting it out as long as I'm around. But I appreciate you letting us come today. It's been so fun to.
Sherry, Ramona, and I sang together 30 years, a little over 30 years. And I think that was one of my favorite things of living here. And Halloween. Halloween was big deal. You go to school, and then the kids came home to eat. And then they got in their costumes. Mothers would be going all around town, letting their kid off to walk to school. So nobody knew which house they came from. And the object was to walk around the hall. The mothers sat around here, and then the kids walked around the hall. And they didn't make any noise. And then the kids were supposed to tell their teacher, that's so-and-so, that's so-and-so. And then if it wasn't, they just kept walking. And finally, there was one child left, and it was a cute little girl. And they kept guessing and guessing and guessing. And they finally said, gather your classes up and let's see who's not in your class. It was David, our boy. He had on this cute little ballet dress that I got from Vella, and he had it with a star on the top. And he was a really cute little girl. And the first time when he sat down, because they let him sit down once in a while, he sat like this. And I thought, well, that's a good giveaway. The next time he sat down, he sat like this. He was just so cute. And then at Halloween night, you had to have a different costume because you didn't go in and say trick or treat. You just stood there. And we were supposed to guess every child. And he was a baker one time, and nobody could guess him at their house. So, and he was a quiet little boy. It's not like he was a tricker. Then, come Halloween at our house, they'd come in and I say, trick or treat. Either do me a trick or give me a treat. So the kids got so that they prepared either a trick or a joke or something. And this one Halloween, I was so tired. It was late and they were, not too many coming. So I thought, I'll turn the lights out. Well, just when I was going to knock on the door, and I answered and handed her the bowl, and she says, aren't you going to have me do my trick? She'd brought a friend from St. George, and she wanted to show off her trick. Another thing I wanted to talk about, but somebody else said it. Vic said that they had horse races. Victor Street went all the way down to the creek, and he said they ran clear up to the top of the ditch where it's at the top. He said he said we did that really often. And then he talked about the ball games, like they said, the North and the South. What else did you not talk about? Let's see. Oh, another time we were Christmas Eve and they were having their program and Santa was handing out the presents and he brought one out and he looked at it and he said, well, let's see. And it was Kenny Hansen. He'd given his girlfriend a diamond and Santa gave it to her. And as soon as he gave it to her, boy, he was taking her out of there really fast. And another time, who was it that was it your dad? Yes. He let a pigeon out of wasn't it your dad? It was a pigeon out of a box, and it flew around and around and caused a great deal of trouble. We had Easter egg bust, and it wasn't just any old Easter egg. We got the eggs, we got them a little warm, and then when they're wet, and we had scavengered all around the house to find whatever flower, whatever weed we could find. And then you put the egg and get it wet, and then you decorate it really fancy. And then you take twine, I use thread, and you just go around and around and around. and then you boil them in red root or onion shells. And they turn out, it's quite a job to get it off without breaking the egg. And when you get it all cleaned up, they are so pretty. My sister and her fiance at the time came once, and oh my gosh, they put faces on them. They worked hours. Well, they didn't know that things run together. So, but that was a lot of fun. And then we went down on the corner on Victor Street, and it used to be a great big crowd. And we met at 8:00, so everybody could get to. We came in our dressed up for church, and we bust Easter eggs. Now it's down to Vicky's family and our family. Not too many. Well, we still have, 25, 30 people there? Oh, maybe more than that. Yeah, we did. But they take turns busting eggs, and the little kids are so thrilled when they get more eggs than they had in there to start with. So Easter was a lot of fun.
And they go home and make potato salad.
And they go home and we made deviled eggs. Potato salad and deviled eggs. Both sound good.
When we were quite young, I would say maybe 8 or 10, me and my girlfriends, I don't know which ones, Dolores and maybe Charmaine, we would go up on the hill and gather flowers in the summer, beautiful flowers, and then we'd take them around to the older people. And I remember taking one to, I believe her name was Barbara Graff. I think it was Mandy's mother.
The first child born in town.
Mandy was?
Barbara.
Barbara was the first child born in Santa Clara. Anyway, she sure did appreciate those flowers. One great blessing I had, I still have now, is my youngest daughter. I had three sons and 2 daughters. My youngest daughter and her husband and 5 children moved to Santa Clara. And I think you all know Dan Derrick and Madeline Derrick and Cade and Chloe and Camry and Courtney. They're my grandchildren. And I'm so proud of them. So far, I haven't got Madeline to put a cow out. I said, I'll get you one for Christmas. But anyway, I'm so happy to have some of my family. That gets me over here a lot more often. And I've loved Santa Clara my whole life. I've always been proud of everything. We knew everybody in Santa Clara, all the older people, the young people, when we were young.
This is something that came to mind. J.D. Laswell, about 3 years ago, he came to work at the fruit stand that summer, and he said, "It made me feel like home. I've always put a saying in my window and decorated the front porch and stuff for 30, 40 years, I don't know. And Mary Alice has done a tree." And he said, "When I came through town and I saw you were still doing that and Mary Alice's tree was on, I felt like I was home."
My kids said, and my daughter Cammie, we were living up in the Moss home and that's when all the cars went back and forth, like through St. George and Santa Clara. And our little daughter Cammie come running in the house, and she says, "Mama, the Herald Angels are coming." And a few minutes later, came all of these motorcycles, big group of Hell's Angels in their black leather jackets. And then another time, when we were going to conference, we'd always go with Arlo and Ramona and Beulah and Marion and some of us to General Conference. And as we were going, we took Shan with us up to Salt Lake one day. And when we went to conference, and he had never been up north before, and he didn't know it was such a long ride. But he said, "Oh, we got up the road quite a ways." And He said, if I'd have known it was going to be this long, I'd have brought 5 cents worth of candy. And one more little thing is Dale was the water board president, and we were living in St. George in an apartment then. And Bill was about 3 years old, and I said he was running around without any pants on. And I said, hurry and get your pants on. These men are going to come and see your bare bum. And he says, oh, no, they won't. It's behind my legs.
The older people's played a big role in my life. And Florence Stuckey is still alive. She turned 100 in June. And I went, you can only go once a week by appointment with Carla now to see her because of COVID. But she has been an inspiration and a hero in my life, my whole life. The first time I saw her, she was roofing her house. And that was just after we were first married. And I thought, what is she doing? So I said one day to her, how come you were up on that roof? She said, well, it needed to be done, so I did it. And she has just been a wonderful person. And everybody here, I remember I was up to Gwendolyn's once and we were making caramels and decided we would cut it with a pizza knife. And I've still got my scar on my thumb from stitches that I got that day.
I make a whole bunch of egg bread and give all my girls, all of the people that are married, a loaf of egg bread and a quart of honey that I get from Honeyman. But you grate it, and then you put like quite a few eggs in the batter when you mix the bread. Claire's mother taught me how to make egg bread, and you braid it, and then when it's just about half done, you just put a little bit of topping on it so that it rounds it a bit. Yeah, all the kids just love it. I have the freezer clear full of egg bread by the time Christmas comes, so I can give it away.
When we moved here, Annalise Entz lived across the street from Wanda and Landon, and she was very crafty, should I say. And every time we had a project to do in Relief Society, Annalise was in charge. And one year she went down to the creek and cut a whole bunch of willows, and they were just tiny ones. And she came back and softened them up, and we made willow baskets. I still have mine. And then another thing she did that took a really lot of time was we made nativity sets. Do you remember the dip and drape? Okay, you did it? You did one? Oh, you got 3 sets. Oh, well, she had a porcelain head for Mary, and then she had all kinds of heads. And she put wigs on some of them. They just clamped over on them. And she had a bunch of beads that she brought. We all were supposed to be, all these beads that we didn't use anymore, anything that was shiny and gold for the wise men. And we made them out of styrofoam. And here's a block here, and there's a block here, and the head on top. And we spent one night at Relief Society, and I think we spent almost a whole week at Annalise's every night. The time she put in for us was just amazing, but it was really, really fun. And it's probably, well, it is my favorite nativity set. And I got a new cupboard, and I didn't have a place for my nativity set. And I knew one of my granddaughters really liked it, and I thought, I'll give it to her, but everybody else was getting valuable money things, And I thought, Ashley, will you feel bad if I give you this nativity set? And she says, oh, Grandma, that's the thing I wanted. So she's had it for 3 Christmases. And then another one that I really liked and felt good with was Villa Ruth Hafen. She's my mother's age, but we just hit it off so well. Enjoyed each other and talked with each other. And when Press died, I went right down. She said, I knew you'd be here. So she was another one. And, well, like you said about Florence. She was just a sweetheart. And she did everything. She watered, and she had raised a family that were her husbands. And then she had two, Vaughn and, two. But she's always been a delight to be around. She told me lots of stories about before she came here and after they got married and the things that she did. So she made quite an impression on me.
I need to say one more. I just thought of one more thing. At Christmas time, we always had a big big town meeting up in the hall of the schoolhouse. And we had a big Christmas tree, and people came and had a nice program, and they brought their little kids. But the little kids all got a present. They all got a doll. And the Santa Claus was there, and he'd read their name out on the dolls. And I helped to do that. Landon Fry asked me and one of my friends, maybe it was Lucy Whitwer, if we would go around and collect dolls from all the parents that had just little young girls, little girls. I don't know what the boys got, but we went around and got these dolls and then took them to Landon, and he kept them and took them up. They wrapped them, I guess, the mothers, and put them under the Christmas tree, and then Santa Claus would pick them out and read their names, and they'd get this beautiful doll from Santa. That was the biggest thing in their life, I believe. Anyway, that was fun, and Landon was always doing things like that to help the community.
He was the announcer on the rodeo.
Oh, Landon? Oh, Grandma said he always announced the rodeos, in the Santa Clara rodeos. I hated to have them end because they were so good. Anybody else?
My grandfather was one of the original settlers in Santa Clara. Not great-grandfather, that dates me, but he was one of the original settlers in Santa Clara, and he was an older child when they came here. And one time, Brigham Young came down to visit that area and to, connect with the people like they did and stuff. We used to get the prophets frequently down here. And he was going, after he got through with conference and stuff in St. George, he was going to come to Santa Clara and check it out and see the people here. And so they asked Grandpa if he would go over around the point of the hill, and when they saw the wagon bringing Brigham Young, hurry up and run back here as fast as he could to beat him so that they could have the old brass band, the old Staley brass band that you've all heard about, greet him as he entered into town. And that was a big day in his life. He loved to tell us stories, and I loved to hear them from the original ones. And we bought his home, and he finished living with us at the end of the time. And I grew up in the original Pioneer home in Santa Clara.
My father-in-law lived with us for the last 36 years of his life, and he told me lots of fun things. The house we live in now is the same house that the Pioneers built, but it's been remodeled several times. And he said that he would be playing with these little friends, and it wasn't even dark. It was by the time she was ready to eat, the grandma would come out and she would call, Vivian. His name was Vivian. And he said, I had to leave the friends and come home and sit with her. And there wasn't any television or black box. He just had to sit there with her. But to know that we're still living in part of their house is really fun. Everybody that comes in and finds out that the house is that way, I said, okay, stand where this raises on the floor, and stand here where it raises on the floor. There's 4 inches from my room, my kitchen slopes 4 inches. But I can feel where they were added on from. It was a 2-story, and then they took the top off and built part of the downstairs. And then Vic's father, Bob, the grandpa, brought it when he and Grandma were married, And they made the adobes and added on. And then when we came to live with Grandpa, we added on. We always had Sunday dinner with whoever wanted to come. All the kids came and grandkids by the time they were great grandkids, but whoever came could eat with us. And we did that for all until COVID. And then one of my sons says, "You can't have dinner anymore." And I said, "Okay." And we outgrew the kitchen. So darn, we had to add on a great big room. Really hurt my feelings.
I remember Nellie Gubler. She was so talented in everything and helped with everything. And she made that school book with the pictures. It was put together by Joyce Whitaker. But she had most all the pictures, and most all of us have our names in there, things that we remembered about the schools. And then I remember going to Theodore Graff's store often. He sold just candy and little things, I guess. I don't know. I didn't ever buy much, but we used to stop in there and just to see him and visit with him. And, you know, we had so many wonderful people, the older people in town. We knew them all. And I can't even go ahead and name them all, but they were wonderful.
Oh, grandfather or great-grandfather Hans, Dolph Hafen, he ran the store for 11 years after his father didn't. One thing that used to fascinate me, I never got to do it, but all of these kids did. And when they go to the store and want to buy candy, usually it was 2 things for a penny. That was the penny candy that they had. Well, they could take an egg, and an egg counted for 2 cents, and he never ran out of eggs.
That's all we had was
Talking about the older people, 2 I remembered especially was Hi and Laura Gubler. They were friendly. They didn't have any kids. They didn't, either one of them ever married. But I would take my kids there occasionally in the strollers and for a walk, and they were always so good to them, and she'd always come out with some little thing for them, and I just always remember them, how lonely their lives must have been without children or mates. But I was impressed with them.
I forgot to mention Bella Ruth Hafen. She was an absolute hero in my life, and she gave me a violet in '07 when I had my knee done, and that still blooms every single day. And if I forget to water, it's like a catastrophe at our house. Anyway, I see her every day in that violet, and it's just been wonderful.
I think Olive Moss is one of my heroes, too. She played the piano for our trio and was always willing to come and do.
Vella and Annalise and Elva sang.
Did.
And when Olive couldn't play for them, they had me play for them, piano. And I was just new, and a new bride, and with young kids. And I learned a lot from those ladies who were a little bit older about the men and, you know, how you needed to treat them and get along with them. Can I tell one little thing, too, about our kids? It's about Hans, since he's right there in front of me. They'd play at the school grounds real often. I don't know whether this was at recess or what, but at one time he was going to be the horse and somebody was going to pull the horse. And he put a rope in his mouth and put a knot in the end of it, and then he was pulling him along, and all of a sudden he gave a jerk and pulled Hans's 2 front teeth till they were just hanging. And who was it? Doctor, he was just a new Merv Cox. He was a new orthodontist in the area.
He fixed it.
So Arlo took him over. I couldn't go and do that. So he left school. I don't know how he left school, but he did, and took Hanson. Dr. Cox pushed his teeth back in, and I think it still got him.
Just had the one replaced 2 years ago.
Okay, one replaced 2 years ago.
But he must have been a very good new orthodontist.
The Santa Rosa, how many years would you say?
I don't know.
But that's where that was the big Saturday night. Everybody went to the Santa Rosa and danced, and it stopped at midnight dead. And when and they'd always have it in the summertime because it was open air. And if there was a holiday, like the 4th of July came on Monday, they would start Sunday night at midnight for the dance, and it'd go till sunup. But Ken Ants and Milo Ants built it, and they even had activities there, and they decided they'd have a contest to name it. They didn't have it, it was just a dance hall that they'd built in a very popular place. And so they had the contest, and Mama entered the name. She heard that they were planting a lot of roses by it, so she entered the name of Santa Rosa, and she won the prize for it. Mom. And it was either $5 or else $10, and that was marvelous in those days. That went a long ways.
I remember my dad was the sheriff in Santa Clara, and he'd have to go and supervise those dances. And so he'd let me go and sit in the car, and he'd drive right up by the dance hall, and I could watch the dancers. And I'm not sure I ever got to go dance there. I thought maybe it discontinued. But you danced there. Did you ever dance there, the Santa Rosa? It was a wonderful place.
You guys are all too young.
Oh, we look too young. Yeah, Vic played town bell. Oh, yes, we still have the bell at our house. It had to be dark before they chose up groups, and the object was to ring the bell up in a tree and then throw it to one of your cohorts, and they'd run someplace. The people that heard the bell ringing, they went to here, and the bell was always gone. And the object was to grab the bell from the other team and then start their turn. And Vic said it was really a lot of fun. Huh? Oh, yes, and the crowds, whole town, but the town wasn't as big as it is now. So parents really could hear the bell and they could find where their child was. Yeah, town bell was a lot of fun. Santa Clara really has a special spirit. You can drive into town and you can feel it. And I hope that our families appreciate it and the sacrifice that went into it to settle it and to be proud of it and take care of your yards. Like Santa Clara, they're famous for keeping their yards clean and being loving and kind and helping each other.
I think I've already said how much I love Santa Clara. One thing I was going to mention, when I went to school at St. George, I saw this cute young guy. He was in my class, and I thought, oh, wow, he's handsome. And I found out his name was Stanley Hafen. And I was telling my mom, he's really nice looking, and he's walked over to visit me in Santa Clara with his friends. And she said, well, you know, he's your cousin. You're half Hafen, so you better find somebody else to talk to. And I've had grandchildren that's had a hard time going with boys in St. George, the ones that live in Santa Clara. They get boyfriends in St. George. And the first one that one of my granddaughters had was, she met him in Cedar when she had gone up to Cedar to finish her school. And she said, oh, he's a wonderful boy, Mom. I really like him, and he likes me. And she said, well, ask him what his grandma's name is. And so she asked him, and he said, oh, it's Rita Gubler Hanson. And the granddaughter says, well, my grandma's Edna Hunt, and they're sisters.
The fame spreads of the competition and the strong competitive urge that the people in Santa Clara had. And I think they kind of do to a certain extent, but it was really strong in the good old days when I was a young person. I went to BYU, and I walked into, the very first day I walked into the classroom to do my student teaching when I was about through. And would you believe it? My teacher trainer that I was going to work under was actually from Anderson Junction, which I didn't know at the time. And she introduced me this way. She said who I was, and I was going to be the student teacher, and I was from Santa Clara, Utah. And she said, you know what? They were the smartest spellers in the whole county. They prided themselves, and when they go to the competition and everything, Santa Clara always won the spelling. They really had a reputation for that.
I'm just grateful for all the people here in Santa Clara who helped raise our kids, who were their teachers and their leaders, their Cub Scout leaders and their coaches, and I just appreciate all the people who have helped and been such a big blessing to me.
I'm very grateful that I live in Santa Clara. I have always loved it here, and I hope that my grandkids, Lacey, likes it here. And I hope all of them like it as well as I do.
We were grateful that we had the store in town because it taught our kids to work, and they're all good workers. So I'll always remember Santa Clara as being a hardworking place where people, they like to work. And that's what's missing nowadays, I think, in our world is hard workers aren't available anymore. And so I appreciate that for Santa Clara.
I was thinking of Dale's grandmother, Rosina Blickensdorfer Gubler, and then she married a Blake. And she was left, Henry Gubler, her husband, was playing ball. He loved to play baseball, and he got hit in the head with the ball, and he died. And it left her with these two little boys, and she would go glean out in the fields to gather what she could. And it was a brother Ance, I can't think of his name, that helped her so much. She would do ironings for people and do what she could to earn for these little boys. And it reminds me also of the time when Dale was the stake president and we would have lovely dinners. Back in those days, they didn't go to hotels and rooms, the general authorities, but they stayed in our home, and we had good, lovely dinners. I'd start a month ahead for these dinners. And my sweet little daughters, Megan and Heather, would be left with all the dishes when we would go up to the meetings.
Remember how blessed we are for our ancestors. And all our kids, the ones who don't live here, would like to come back here. They all call it home and love to come back and love to have them. And they have good memories of those who have been their mentors and employed them as they worked in the fruit stands and pulled weeds and did all these. And they learned to work. I'm so grateful that our kids were taught to work. That's been such a blessing.
John George Hafen, he owned the home that my grandma lived with him. He lived with her the rest of it until he died. And that was our home where I grew up. And he was a great man. I think he was bishop for 28 years. Is that right? Uh-huh. And he was a wonderful man. And my grandpa Gubler was Herman Gubler, and his wife was Selena. And they were just wonderful people, too. I did know him. Grandpa had died before I was born, I guess. But Grandpa Gubler, he used to come out and visit our family. He would walk up he lived behind the church, where June Gubler took over the home and where he lived. But he would come up and visit with my parents and visit with all of us. He'd just come in and just sit there for, quite a few, several hours. He wouldn't talk much, but I thought, how nice. He just comes and I can know it's my grandpa, and I'd sit by him, and he didn't talk too much, but He was a wonderful man, but we did learn to work. Our grandparents started it, and then our parents. We knew how to work, and every one of us. I spent most of my time on the farm and in the ranch with my dad, and all my sisters did except one. Mom had to have one girl stay at home and help wash the windows and mop the floors, and so Lena is the one that liked to do that. The rest of us, we spent our time learning to work, hauling hay and stomping the hay, and then hauling it to the barn. And Charmaine remembers going to our barn and seeing all the hay and seeing our cows. And we even sit there and watched one have a calf, didn't we? But that I wanted to mention that learning to work, because that was one of the greatest things that we were taught by our parents. We had to learn to work. We weren't given anything. I didn't think we were poor. We didn't have any money, but my one sister said, well, we were really poor. She couldn't have what she wanted, new dresses. I said, well, Mom made our dresses, all of our clothes. I didn't think we was ever poor. I didn't ever have any money till I started working part-time, just as a young girl. And then when I was getting older, we always could find a job doing something. So that was one of the big examples that we were taught, and I appreciate them very much.
Our family loves Santa Clara so much, and that we have 4 children, and 2 of them live across the street from me. The one lived through the block, and then the one that moved the farthest away was a mile. So that tells us that Santa Clara is a good place to live.